Folks, as always, I got a real treat today. Leon DeSimone. Is that how you pronounce it?
DeSimone.
DeSimone. True Italian name.
That's right.
Huh? So, folks, if you guys don't know who he is, at Leon the Loan Guy. Now he's a big time, basically, mortgage guy.
That's right.
And you wholesale.
Yeah,
you're into real estate.
Real estate investor, and then got into the mortgage business, primarily focusing on a lot of investors.
Now, if you guys are thinking, well, Brad, shit, you always have real estate people on here. What's the point? Well, the point is to make sure everybody understands what's going on, people, so you don't get hamburglared. Besides that, Leon has also been a Las Vegas native for 35 years, and he spent 25 of those years with the Metropolitan Police Department.
That's right.
With old Metro.
That's right.
You had a badge.
I did. Still do.
You still do, huh?
Retirement badge.
You walked around with some authority.
You could say that, yeah.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be a cop for some reason. It didn't work out, but I think it was a couple DUIs. They didn't like those.
Yeah, that might offset it a little bit.
But if I didn't get those, if I had better parenting, if I would have been more responsible as a young man, I would have been in law enforcement myself.
Well, they say there's a very fine line between a criminal and a cop.
Well, that's another reason I think, hey, fate has a way of working out for itself, but maybe that's why I wasn't one. Because I always tell people, like, if I were a cop and I busted into a room where there was $10 million and 2 kilos of coke, I'd snatch the sumbitch up, bring him down to jail, and turn in the $1,000 in the 8-ball and say, hey, I found this guy.
Well, that's probably why we have body cams and stuff like that now.
That's also what Internal Affairs does, right?
Yeah. They're like the police of the police.
Who do you believe that there's, when I say dirty cops, obviously there's dirty cops, but what ratio would you believe are on a force, on an average force?
I mean, even historically speaking and statistically, it's very small. Of course, the only thing that's going to get media attention, right, is the dirty cops. So you run into that confirmation bias where all you see is news flashes of dirty cops, and so you think that's the case. And it's very small. And I spent, like I said, 25 years with Metro. 10 of that was in a leadership position as a sergeant and as a lieutenant. So I was supervising detectives and sergeants. And, there's an extensive background that goes on in law enforcement. Now, of course, people are going to slip through the cracks. That's always going to happen. People evolve as a person, and sometimes that happens with temptation. But overall, I mean, it's a very low number. Like I said, there's a lot of ethics and stuff that, there's pride with that badge. When you pin on that badge, there's ethics and morals that go along with it. So when you do something that tarnishes that badge, I mean, that pisses every cop off. I mean, there's no cop out there that's like, oh, let's give this guy a pass. We take it a lot harder than the actual person that's doing it, because we know we have an uphill battle with reputation, especially in the last, 5-10 years. So, but yeah, we have Internal Affairs. There's also a citizen review board that reviews things for certain matters that go beyond a group of citizens. There's checks and balances. I mean, Metro is the, they're the leader when it comes to, disclosure and transparency. I mean, a lot of agencies across the nation follow their model. They're one of the top 10 agencies.
What, who, Metro?
Yeah.
I'll be down.
And so, that's what a lot of people don't understand. There's over like 20,000 police departments, right, in this country. Majority of them, over half, have less than 10 officers. Metro's got 3,000 or 4,000 officers, 5,000 employees. So it's a big agency. And with a big agency comes a lot of checks and balances.
Who's in charge of that industry? The police chief?
No, it's the sheriff.
The sheriff.
It's an elected position, which right now is Joe Lombardo. But as you probably know, he's running for governor. Kevin McMahill is the sheriff-elect. So
a lot of people think the sheriff just runs the deputies. The sheriff runs the whole police department.
Yeah, it's a matter of semantics, right? I mean, every agency has a different title, chief of police, sheriff. The unique thing about Las Vegas, and what I think is very beneficial, especially for the people, is that the sheriff is an elected position, right? It's elected by the people. He answers to the people. Chief of police in most police departments are appointed by a mayor. So in essence, their boss is a mayor that might not have any type of police background, any knowledge on police procedure, and then it becomes a political show.
So here's my question as a police officer. When you're hearing in the news, like, these people are doing such and such, but the cops were told to stand down. So they do, because they follow orders.
Right.
But weren't you sworn to uphold the law? And isn't that breaking the law? So why can you listen to a superior to overlook and condone the law being broken with the oath that you took?
Well, it depends on the context of that, right? I mean, there's what we call tactical retreat, right? There's also, and I know what you're talking about in some of the other jurisdictions.
Well, I'll give you an example, like California.
Yeah.
They allow you to shoot drugs in a clean environment with clean needles. They provide them. They give you the spot and the needles.
Right.
Isn't that against the law?
Well, it is against the law, but
so how is the state elected officials? Who are they to say this is no longer against the law, and then the cops don't do anything about it, when in reality, that's breaking the law, and the cops should be arresting those people regardless of what those politicians say.
Yeah, I agree. And that's when you get into the politics of it, right? I mean, we live in a world right now where politics is heavy, especially with the influence of social media and the ability that they can get widespread. I don't have specific knowledge about what you're talking about. I'm glad to say that in Las Vegas, it doesn't happen like that. If you look at what happened during, all the things that happened in the last 5 or 10 years, you didn't see the amount of rioting and all that kind of stuff in Las Vegas. We have a different culture out here. We're very upfront and transparent. And that's the biggest thing, is the lack of transparency is what will turn people against you. So you got to get that information out. We were one of the first agencies to have the body cam. So that right there. But when you go back,
but you guys can turn them off.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, yeah, you're not going to keep them on when you got to go take a leak, right? But you're going to keep them on. There's a policy in place to put it,
Of course there is.
Yeah.
But people get around that. Not that I think all cops are bad, but I know that there's cops that, like, someone's being a punk or a smart ass and they get a little bit roughed up on the way to jail, or in jail, they get a little treatment.
Right.
They just turn those cameras off.
There's policies in places for that. When they first came out, obviously there was this huge backlash. Nobody wanted to wear a body cam, all that kind of thing. And so you had a lot of instances of that. But now it's become such the norm. And like I said, there's policies in place. So if you do that and then there's an allegation, you're going to get hemmed up just on to turn that body cam off.
Well, not only that, but it should protect the officer just as much.
Oh, and that's exactly what it does.
With lies.
Yeah. And so that's what happened, is the narrative switched, right? You get newer cops that are getting hired on right now. They're like, body cam, yeah, big deal. I got social media. I've got everything.
Yeah. What do you think of the cops doing social media? Is that allowed?
It depends on the agency, right? And that's the issue that we have, I think, in America, is that all cops get lumped into one, and there's so many agencies and so much different training and everything that goes into it that, you can't lump. There's no standardization on policing, right? Each state has their own, what's called like a post, like police officer standard training. And then, but there's no national standardized training. So, when you look at an agency of, say, 10 officers, where their chief of police has got a span of control of 10 or 15, it's going to have a different culture, right, than an agency of 5,000 that's treated like a corporation that's got a $500 million budget.
Yeah.
So.
Nice budget.
Yeah. But it's, like I said, it's a big agency.
Yeah.
And the top 10.
So back in the days of the pandemic, where businesses and people were told to shut down and or put on their masks, and the police would enforce those laws, did any of the police say, this isn't a law, this is just a mandate? Which, by the way, is mandate a law?
No. Well, I would have to disagree with you on that. I wasn't on the police. I retired in 2019, right before all this happened. But obviously I've got friends and all that kind of stuff. And the cops, the police officers, they weren't enforcing that. They weren't directed to enforce that. There was.
So who would?
Well, at that time, there was business license, right? They were the ones that were technically enforcing that, because that was falling under a business license.
I know, but if you walked into a business and refused to wear a mask, they told you to leave, you didn't leave, the cops came.
Well, now you're trespassing. Now you've reached the element of criminality, right?
Got it.
And so there was no cop out there going, hey, put on your mask, right? It wasn't happening.
You were told to wear a mask though, weren't you?
Yeah. Like I said, I wasn't on the department at that time, but yeah, I believe cops were told to wear a mask.
What'd you think of the mask deal?
At first when everything was new, I was like, okay, I was pissed off about it. I didn't wear a mask, My wife's in medical sales, so she obviously takes a different stance when it comes to medical stance on it. But no, it was a pain in the ass, and I don't agree with all the stuff that happened. I mean, look at what happened to our economy, right? I mean, we're seeing it right now through inflation and all this free money that popped out. And in hindsight, this will go down in history books as a mistake that we did, that we're paying for it now.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
Hey,
I got a bomb.
it's a bomb right there. So being a police officer for all that time, you had to have seen some serious crazy shit. And were you also, you say, in the Vice?
Yeah. So just a real quick synopsis. I spent 25 years. During that time, I moved up to the rank of lieutenant. When I retired, I was a section commander of the special victims section. So we dealt with the worst of the worst, homicide of children, elderly abuse, animal cruelty, and then missing persons that oftentimes ended up being dead or murdered. But prior to that, I had done it all. I was strip bikes, right? Riding around the bike on the yellow, with a yellow jacket, yellow shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Great time. And then I spent my best time on the agency was 7 years that I spent in Vice working undercover. And I did that.
Were you busting hookers?
Yep.
So let me ask you a question, because I've always wondered about this, because theoretically, in my mind, and again, I just tell the truth. I tell my truth. In my truth, if you're an adult and we live in a free country and you want to fuck someone for money, well, go ahead. I don't have to participate just because you're willing to do it. So I don't think it should be against the law personally, but it is nonetheless. A lot of people do not know that if you come to Vegas, prostitution is against the law. You have to go out to these, brothels.
Yeah.
And by the way, why is it legal there, but it's not legal here? See, it's just stupid shit like that. But to me, I thought, man, there's got to be a way around it. Now, if I go out and meet a woman and we consensually go to a hotel and have sex, what makes it prostitution?
It doesn't, and that's the irony of it.
So what makes it prostitution?
What makes it prostitution is the actual explicit offer or agree to engage in a sexual act or sexual gratification for a fee.
Okay, so if that's the law, and again, I'm just trying.
I got you, man. I know where you're going.
But let's pretend a girl had a bottle of water that she purchased, and she said, if you were to buy this bottle of water for $1,000, I would be so happy with you, I'd probably suck your dick. And they bought the water for $1,000, and then she just volunteered to suck his dick. Is that prostitution?
Yeah, I mean, now could a defense attorney argue against that? Sure. It's a matter of semantics, right?
But if a cop came and heard that story, what would you guys say?
Well, see, what we would go off of is the disposition of that person, right? Do they have a history of engaging in prostitution?
Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Like if I'm a cop, I'm listening to the story, I'd go, clever, you son of a bitch. Yeah, I'm going to let you go, but trust me, don't do that. But there's got to be a way around it, because two people having sex consensually is not against the law. And the exchange of money for that sex is what's against the law. So why don't prostitutes just exchange something else for money and then just be so happy and grateful that they have sex?
Well, I'm going to tell you, Brad. Hold on a second. A lot of them do that, right? It's a word game. And so a good detective is going to be able to explicitly get that. She might start off with that conversation of, hey, I'm just going to give you, I mean, they use it by saying entertainment, right? A lot of times they don't explicitly say, hey, I'm going to suck your dick and it's going to be $500.
Because they're worried about you being a cop, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they'll get around it and be like, I'm an entertainer, I provide fun, and that's where it becomes a good detective to be able to listen to them, find out what they're saying, right? And then be able to sneak in conversation in there that they don't even realize what's going on. Say that, hey, that's great. I've always wanted to come out to Vegas and get a blowjob. So yeah, let's do this.
Did you ever
something to that effect? I mean, there's always going to be the word games, and as people, we call it being in the game. When that's the culture of prostitution, the subculture of it. How long you've been in the game, and so the longer that they're doing it, right? The thing about undercover work is that every time they get arrested, they learn something, right? So you're constantly having to feed them misinformation, right? So the next time they get arrested, they don't actually know, whether that person's a cop or not. So you're going to play the word game, and a defense attorney might argue stuff like that. But then you're going to get into, okay, well, this girl has a history of prostitution. She's been arrested 20 times for this. It's obviously that she was trying to play semantics and get around the word game. And it goes like that. But, I want to touch on your question about the legality of it and why it's, why isn't it legal? And you're right. I mean, I mean, we could argue that we're all engaging in prostitution, right? You take a girl out to dinner, you buy her dinner, you're doing this, you end up having sex. I mean, what is the difference, right?
That's what I always wonder.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a valid point. You know, the difference is that these people are actually going out explicitly doing this as a profession, right? But more importantly, when I talk about like, why is this illegal? You got to understand is that, and I feel the same way sometimes, but it's all about how they got into the game of prostitution. Nobody wakes up for the most part and says, you know what? I think I want to become a prostitute. There's deep psychological issues that are going on with them.
Why do people always assume that? Why can't someone just want the money and realize they're going to have sex anyway? So like, again, if a old lady would have told me when I was growing up, I'll give you whatever you want. I'll buy you cars. I'll do whatever you want, but you just got to, get me good. Yeah. I mean, I'd have done it. And I don't have psychological issues.
Yeah.
I wanted the money.
And a lot of guys say that, right? Because it's like, hey, we want sex anyways. Now we can get paid for it. Let's do it. Right.
Hey.
So, and I agree,
why
right?
not?
But here's what I want to break down to you. These girls that get into a prostitution, and this is just based upon, this is statistical and historical information. This is why we have these things. We're not just kind of guessing. We look at the backgrounds of these people, and these people, they're children. A lot of prostitutes get into the game when they're a child. They're
underage.
What's up?
Underage.
Yeah, underage.
Yeah, that should be against 16. The law.
Well, absolutely, and it's way more serious.
Do you ever run into them where they're like not even 18 years old and they're a prostitute?
Yeah.
And do they have a pimp?
Yeah.
And the pimp, is it clear, or do they have their rules where you can't bust them?
That we can't bust the pimp?
Yeah.
Oh no, we'll try to. We'll definitely go after the pimp, and that's where. When you talk about like policing and going out there and why are we doing this and all that, it's about saving, even if you're saving one child, right? It's about there and making a difference for somebody.
100%.
Somebody that's an adult, 25, 30, that's doing this is just a deterrent. This is their equivalent of paying taxes, really, when you look at it. But what you're doing is that you're understanding that a lot of people, 80, 90% of the people that get into prostitution got into it as a child, because they would come from broken homes, fatherless backgrounds. And especially today with the influence of social media, everybody wants to make money, be somebody and all that. And so that's how a pimp is able to go in there and entice, encourage, compel someone to engage in the act of prostitution. And so it's a mind fuck, right? And then once they get into it, they're not keeping the money. That's going right to their pimp to live their lifestyle.
Isn't that nuts?
It's insane. And so when people are
talk about a closer. Like a pimp's got to be a salesman son of a bitch to get a girl to go work like that and then bring them the money. And a lot of times there's a relationship there where that girl actually believes that they're together.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the weirdest shit ever.
It's brainwashing is what it is. And that's what we do, where I say, my former agency we called it the Innocent Lost Task Force. It was an FBI task force that strictly dealt with that. And it was deprogramming them to understand that that's not your boyfriend, because that's how they get them, right? A pimp doesn't go up to them and say, "Hey, let's go engage, and I want you to be a hoe," right? It's the typical courting somebody, be your boyfriend, all that. I'm an entertainer, or I'm they have a lot of front money laundering, so maybe they're a record producer, they're in the music business, and they get them that way, and then slowly. As they're, building that rapport with them, another thing in sales, right? Getting somebody like you, building rapport, they're grooming them. And then before you know it, it's like, hey, just go out on a date. Do this. We'll get you some money.
What do you think some signs are where if fathers are out there, they got beautiful little daughters that are starting to get, 15, 16, start running around with their friends? What are some signs that, hey, you better pay attention?
Tell me about it. I got a 3-year-old daughter, living in Vegas.
I got 3 little. Well, I have adults now too, but my 3 littlest, we live in Vegas. My wife wants to move to Nashville. I'm like, why? I don't want to raise them in Vegas.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's wrong with Vegas? Vegas ain't. I like Vegas, but when it comes to the underbelly, a lot wrong with Vegas. But what are the signs that you would look out for? Because, dude, a lot of parents, they love their children. They don't realize that there's signs before that shit happens. Yeah. Boyfriends that are getting involved, they're starting to act a certain way. They're distancing themselves, hiding things.
Well, I'll tell you the commonality, and there's always going to be the exception, right? I mean, you're always going to have a child that grew up in a great family and just happened to be the black swan or the outcast, and off they went. So as a parent myself, I think first and foremost is that, it comes down to the structure of the parenting, right? I mean, statistics show that if you have both parents in a relationship, a lot of times they're in a more stable relationship, especially when it comes to prostitution. We all hear the thing, oh, she's got daddy issues, right? Well, that's a real thing. When people don't have acceptance from their fathers, whether because they're not there or they're working all the time or they're not feeling loved, then what do women do? Or, what do people do? They go out and they seek that acceptance. And no matter how much they get it, they never feel like it's enough. So what does a pimp do? He gives them all those voids that are in their mind, right? And so, I think the biggest thing is you got to be present with your children. You got to be, aware of what they're doing. And social media has changed the game, right? When I first got into the Vice unit, this was 2001. So social media wasn't where it's at today. A lot of times it was like the yellow pages still.
I don't even think there was social media then.
There was, there was MySpace, but it wasn't at the level it is today, right? Nowhere near it. It's completely changed the game. And now we're at the point now where...
Where's MySpace now?
My gone, I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't exist, but there's always something to replace it. Yeah, I remember it.
Did you have a MySpace page?
I did. I had that. Yeah, you click on that bad boy, a little music playing.
Dude, so what about from what I hear, there's tunnels. There's an underground city underneath Las Vegas where there's underground shit going on. And a lot of times they'll snatch the kids and bring them underneath there. Is that true?
No, I wouldn't say that true. When you talk about underground tunnels, that's the homeless population. There's a huge network of underground tunnels. Obviously we live in a basin, right? It's like a big sink. That's why we have such, the rainfall when it rains all downstream from the mountain. So, that's a whole different underground world down there.
Cops never go down there?
No, they do. Yeah, they do. But it's, like most cities, we have a huge homeless problem.
But I heard like it's dangerous down there.
Oh yeah. Well, anytime you go into an area like that where you're dealing with homeless people.
Is it all dark down there?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you have a big flood, right? And it gets washed away and got to start all over again. But anytime you deal with that type of element, especially a lot of mental illness, I wouldn't want to be hanging out down there by any means. Huh. But now as far as, is there like a threat where people are snatching kids and going down there? No, I've never even heard that, to be honest with you. Never dealt with it.
Well, I heard, I think his name's Tim. He has Underground Railroad. He saves kids. His group goes in and like busts child predator rings and shit like that. And he was putting together a group to go into the tunnels of Vegas and rescue kids. And I'm like, dude, I'll join that shit.
Yeah, well, you definitely have your, you're kind of, there's two different things, right? You got your runaways, your children that are, compulsive runaways, 16 years old, that, that kind of thing. And then you've got your prostitution angle, human trafficking. I would say you're not seeing that type of human trafficking and that kind of stuff down there. Not to say that, hey, it doesn't exist, but I don't think it's prolific. But what you do have is a typical homeless problem that you see in any major metropolitan area, right? With, like I said, runaways and homeless people, mentally ill, that type of thing.
Only a couple more cop questions.
Let's do it.
I think people are listening. People like stories like this. I'm going to eventually get to what you learned there to eventually get you into the mortgages and the real estate. And now I'm sure you're much happier. You get paid a lot more now than you did then.
Yeah, well, your pay's not capped, right? What's that saying that, they pay a salary so you forfeit your dreams, and so you get those golden handcuffs, right? You kind of have to, when you go into law enforcement, I love the job. Don't get me wrong. Mortgages is great, but it's not like, chasing prostitutes and doing all the things that I used to be able to do, going out in clubs and all that kind of stuff. There's a reason you become a cop, right? One, you want to help people. You want to make a difference. And two, you like the adrenaline.
Yeah.
So you're not getting adrenaline doing mortgages.
No.
But you got to stay doing it because you get a pension, right? And you can get a pretty good pension.
But it doesn't pay very well. What's a top cop make?
See, that's all. I think that's a big misconception too. It's not Brad Lee money, but $200,000, easy.
It's decent.
Yeah. But then you take that, right?
I didn't know cops were making $200,000.
Well,
your average cop in a cop car driving around patrol.
Yeah. I mean, they're starting off 60, but after a couple of years, throwing some overtime gigs, you know, all those events you go to, you see cops, nights, games, all that, that's all overtime, right? That's not paid by the taxpayer. That's paid by the individual, you know, what do you call it? Group, or, you know, whoever's putting it on.
Yeah.
And so that's all overtime. So, I mean, you could easily have a cop 4 or 5 years on making $100,000.
That ain't too bad.
Know? And then
better than I thought, but
yeah.
still, you know, you in the mortgage business, you can make millions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about that. What you have to do is there's risk and reward, right? And that's just the way life works. Do you want risk where you can make as much money as possible, but then the next day you're not making anything?
Sure. Why not?
Or do you want a situation where, and this is just different for some people, you know, or do you want a situation where, hey, I don't care what happens to the economy. I'm not getting laid off. I'm not getting fired unless I, you know, do something really bad, commit a felony or something like that. I'm going to have a guaranteed paycheck for the next 25 years plus, because when you retire, you know, you can make 75, 80% of your paycheck for the rest of your life, plus cost of living increases. So you get some rank in there. You get a guy making $200,000 a year, you know, now he's busting out $150,000 a year in his pension, plus cost of living for the rest of his life. Well, guess what? You got a great safety net to go out there and try whatever you want. And you could fail as many times as you want, and you know at least you could put food on the table. And so that's the great luxury about it. You know, I think so many people nowadays are so consumed on social media, and I'm going to become an entrepreneur and all that. And that's great if you want to do that. But let's be real. Not everyone is designed to be an entrepreneur. You know, there's a reason why college has become BS, right? And this blue collar work is coming back in vogue because it's needed as we bring jobs back to America. What we saw during the pandemic with China and not having this supply chain issue, manufacturing, all that's going to come back to America, but you're going to need a lot more blue collar jobs. So, you know, not everyone is going to be an entrepreneur, and not everybody goes into being a cop for the money.
Well, I'm very thankful someone's there to being a cop. So I wouldn't want to convince all the cops to quit.
Right.
But in my mind, all that risk, that's where opportunity is. So like when I started my career, it was commission only. You didn't sell, you didn't get paid, but it didn't bother me. Why? Well, because dude, sell. That's like, you know, if you're a cop and you say you only get paid if you arrest people. Well, fuck, I'm not worried about not arresting people. There's tons of people I can arrest. So I would never be afraid that I'm going to go without a paycheck. But a lot of people do for some reason.
Well, like I said, I mean, it all comes down to personality, right? Not everyone's becoming a cop because of the money. They're also doing it because they enjoy the job.
Yeah. Well, that's why I want.
And a lot of cops also have side gigs.
If the Las Vegas Metro came to me right now and they said, Brad, we will literally make you a police officer, I would do it. Why? Because of that. I think it's fun. I think it would be
indicted in 2
awesome.
seconds.
I may be, but I think it would be awesome. And plus, I'm a pretty smart dude. You know, I've done line walking on the criminal edge, and I think I can like be a force for good, knowing the criminal mind.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's all about body language and reading people. Absolutely.
Do you ever wonder, like, what do you guys do to learn to fight? Because like you see a lot of times these cops getting their ass kicked by regular people on the street, and it's like, don't you guys have MMA training and shit?
Yeah, they do. That was actually a big thing that, you know, I'd say in the last 15, 20 years, you know, but that's just like anything else, right? You're only good if you practice it and continue to do it.
Another fucking bomb.
Yeah.
So eventually, dude, you decided I'm getting out, or what?
Yeah, no, basically we had a 25 and out is what it was. You know, it's changed for some people.
You timed out.
Well, not only did you time out, but it became like, I mean, the reason I got into mortgages is because I love finance and money. And so everything that I do is about numbers. And it comes to a point of diminishing returns. You know, simple math here. If somebody said, I'm going to pay you $100,000 a year to work, right? Or I'll just pay you $80,000 a year and you can not have to work anymore. How much are you really making? You're making $20,000 a year, right? So that's what it came down to. I'm working for pennies on the dollar. You know, why spend 40, 50 hours when I can go into a business and you know, I had the opportunity to have a second career. You know,
so they don't care that you're making money. They're still paying you what you earned.
Yeah. Yeah. You just can't go back into government work locally.
Now, if you got caught doing a felony, would you lose that?
No. Some states, they have laws like that. But in Nevada, There's no law, especially if you've already received your pension.
If you get pulled over by a cop, do they let you go?
Like working like as a cop or
No, like you're driving around and you're speeding and they pull you over. And, and you say, hey bro, I'm a cop. They go, oh, okay, go ahead.
I mean, back in the day, yeah, absolutely. Right. Things were a lot different 15 years ago. I'd say it still probably happens today if it's a minor infraction. But here's the thing, when people are like, oh, cops are getting away with that. There's a lot of people getting away with it. You know how many times I could probably, in my 25 years, I could probably less than 50 speeding tickets I gave, because every cop has their thing that they want to do, right? There's a reason they became a cop. Some want to be traffic cops and that's what they go do. They go out there and they write tickets. They love it. Other cops are like, I don't care about tickets. I want to go find dope or I want to find guns, and so they don't do it. And a lot of cops also have this thing where it's like, hey, if I pull over a nurse, she might be the one saving me or a doctor. I'm not going to give him a ticket. It's called, discretion.
Yeah.
You have discretion when it comes to those minor crimes.
Hey, and by the way, just for the record, everyone here, like number one, I don't condone prostitution. I just said two grown adults, if they should be able to decide if they want to do that for money. Two grown adults, not children, right. None of that. Like, I understand why there's laws and I support those. The other thing, what'd you just say?
I don't remember.
Damn.
Playback.
I know I need to get a playback button in here, but I wanted just to make sure.
Oh, we talk about discretion.
Yeah. Discretion. I had one time gotten drunk with my girl and we get pulled over. Well, my girl was driving, thankfully, and apparently knew the cop, and the cop literally drove in front of us home, knowing full well we were intoxicated. And I'm like, that's bullshit. Like, even though I was the benefactor, like that's bullshit.
Yeah, I
Doesn't
agree.
matter if they're intoxicated and the law says you can't be, you take them to fucking jail. And I don't care if it's your dad, and I don't care if it's a nurse, and I don't care who it is. People should follow the fucking law or not, because then it's like you just roll the dice. I hope a good cop pulls me over.
Yeah.
And by the way, I've been whacked driving drunk too. Like one time I was down on the strip. Could have been you that arrested me. Who knows?
Thought you looked familiar.
But I was down on the strip and literally I was driving with one eye. And I'm so glad actually I got arrested because, dude, I shouldn't have been driving, period. So I got whacked with a DUI I think twice. And then the third DUI,
That's big time right there.
Yeah, well, the judge said, I'm going to drop it to a second, but if you get another one, you're fucked. And so I never got one again. I started like, dude, I'll do a cab. So that's my message to everybody listening. You guys are thinking, you only had a couple of beers, yada, yada, yada. Guys, today with Uber and shit, you got to be a stone cold idiot to drive drunk. There should be zero drunk driving anymore.
Absolutely. And I want to make a distinction there on that. So when we're talking about discretion, right, we're not talking about cops getting away with driving drunk, right? We're talking about, speeding ticket or something like that, which, when I was working, teachers and all that kind of stuff, I mean, it comes down to attitude too, right? If you're going to be an asshole when you get pulled over, well, you might, good chance you're going to get a ticket.
Yeah.
If you act professional.
Or hauled out of the car.
Yeah. But when it comes to the act of driving drunk, I mean, no, there's a zero tolerance policy. And that, it's even more so now that there's body cams. So like your example, that's why body cams exist, because a cop is not going to pull over somebody regardless of who they are. I mean, you've seen in other jurisdictions. I mean, there's been chiefs arrested for DUI, politicians. It's not worth your career to let somebody go, especially if something happens where, they go kill, a family or something like that. Not on my watch.
So when you learned all these techniques in the police force, what translates out to like sales and business?
All of it. I mean, when you really talk about, there's different levels or different areas of policing that we can go into, but the biggest thing about policing is that you learn to read people, right? You learn to read body language. The first thing they teach you in the academy is watch the hands. Why do you watch the hands? The hands are what kill, right? You can't kill me if you don't have a gun in your hand, a knife in your hand, or whatever else. So you're always watching people's hands. You're watching their body language. You're watching where their eyes are going. Are they looking for a plan of escape, as you're talking to them? So as you do that, you realize, I mean, it's 70, 80% of body or of communication is visual.
So if you're talking to a cop, look at them dead in the eyes. Don't look around. Don't dart your eyes.
Depends how guilty you are and what your plan is. Yeah. But I mean, it really comes down to that,
Dude, I don't break laws. And if a cop gets behind me, my stomach drops.
Yeah, it's a natural reaction.
And I don't know why, because there's nothing wrong. Like, I don't do anything wrong.
It happens to be cops, the same thing. You get a cop behind you, you're like, oh shit.
I wonder why.
It's just a trained psychological, it's anxiety. It's fight or flight.
Yeah.
It's not a danger, but you have to subconsciously override the subconscious of, oh shit, there's a cop behind me.
But when you were busting prostitutes, you had to like sell them in a way. Does that help you with your loans?
Yeah. So when you're working undercover, that's a different element. When you're in uniform, and this goes back to confidence, right? So one of the things in sales, right, is to have confidence, know what you're talking about. Walk in there. You say the same thing too, and I say this all the time. Walk into the place like you own it. Because if you do that, people are gonna they're not gonna think twice and be like, oh, he belongs here. And so when you're working in a uniformed position, you got to have, we call it command presence, right? And a lot of times psychologically, the uniform does that. That's why it's a lot easier to get people to comply with you when you're in uniform, because it's that, it's the appeal to authority, so they see that, they're more willing to take your commands as opposed to like being in plain clothes or something like that.
Yeah. So plainclothes cops have a harder time getting people to comply.
Yeah, from a psychological aspect, because we look the same, right? There's no level of authority there. And so that's why you'll see.
But usually that's why you flash your badge.
Yeah, you do, but that's typically to let somebody know that, hey, you're under arrest. We're showing our badge.
Well, I have a badge. It's my badge. And by the way, if you have a badge and it's not your badge, that's a felony, isn't it?
No, I mean, not necessarily.
If you're impersonating a police officer?
If you purport yourself to be a police officer, like you pull out that badge and you say, this is Officer Lee, you're under arrest.
Well, let me ask you a question. It is my badge. I got it legal beagle. Doesn't that make me an officer, a sworn officer?
In the eyes of you, sure.
What about in the eyes of
the law? No.
Why no? I was sworn in.
I don't get where you're going with it.
I was sworn in.
By who?
The mayor of the town.
Well, there's the honorary badge and all that kind of stuff. And, and maybe you do have some type of police power in that state, I mean, when you're sworn into office, right, as a police officer, you have jurisdiction in that county or jurisdiction that you're being employed under.
This was Oroville, California.
Yeah.
Which I've never been to.
I don't even know where that.
Well, what happened was I was doing this speech, and turns out the mayor of Oroville, California was in the audience. And I told in the speech that, I always wanted to be a cop. So she came up afterward and she's like, you always wanted to be a police officer, huh? I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, I could help you with that. And I'm like, really? I'm thinking she's just, I didn't even know she was the mayor. And so she said, if I could make you a police officer, that would check the box and you'd live your dream. I'm like, sure. So she comes up with this lady the next day and swore me in right there with a document. I had to sign it. She gave me my badge. It was like, so now I'm a police officer. Of course it was honorary.
Yeah.
But I talked to my buddy who was an FBI guy for 20 years and he said, they didn't swear you in. I said, yeah, they did. And I showed him the video because I have it on video. And he said, dude, she shouldn't have done that. I said, why? He goes, because if she swore you in, bro, you're a sworn officer. And if you're a sworn officer, you're a real police officer. And I'm like, I don't buy it. I'm still not going to act on it. But still, if I walk up with my badge and say, Officer Lee,
right,
would I be lying?
Yeah, because like if you did it in Vegas, you have no jurisdiction in Vegas.
Doesn't matter. I'm still an officer.
Well, you could still do a citizen's arrest too. You don't need a badge.
I know, but I'm just saying, would I ever get in trouble if I said I am a police officer? Because I am one technically.
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Neither would I. Neither would I. I'm just wondering because, like, when I see that badge, I just
the sheriff or the chief of police does have the authority to, like, swear people in. There's the honorary. It's like an honorary degree, right? Do you really have a degree, or is it just a good thing to put on your resume? And I have friends that have badges like that. Honorary type things. There's even celebrities that I think Was it Shaquille O'Neal or something
Sure.
like that?
No, he's a real one.
Yeah, maybe he's a real one. And a great guy too, huge supporter of law enforcement. But there's also, to keep your certification as a police officer, you got to have annual training and all that. You know, it's not like you're sworn in and you're good to go forever. I mean, you have a certain...
Well, I figured I'd just use it to get out of tickets and shit. But, you know, number one, I don't get pulled over very much. But when I finally did get pulled over, I had it in this little badge wallet. And so I opened it just to grab something to be like, look.
Yeah.
He didn't give a shit.
The old badge trick. Yeah.
He didn't give a shit.
Let me get my driver's license. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, he didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
He didn't even say anything. He just looked.
Well, there's some cops that don't give a shit, you know. Even if you're like an active police officer, they're like, whatever.
Yeah, he didn't even ask.
Yeah.
So there's no trick to it. I'm trying to figure out if there's any hacks to get out of tickets.
Yeah, I'll tell you the hack. I mean, well, one, don't break the law, but hey, we all do it. You know, it's not act like we're not speeding or whatever. But the biggest thing is just be polite. Don't be an asshole. Don't whip out your camera and be like, I'm recording you. You know, it's like, well, yeah, so am I. I got my body cam on you. You know, I mean, it comes.
So don't be an asshole is the number one hack a cop would advise the public.
Isn't that the number one hack in sales and anything else? What do you want to do? You want to get people to like you. People, when people like you and they can associate with you, they're more willing to be accepting of you. And, you know, now if you're out there doing all kinds of crazy stuff or breaking the law, yeah, you might get a ticket, but you might get lenient on it too. You know, he might write you for 5 over instead of the 20 over you were doing.
Yeah.
But the guaranteed way, you got to reword that. The guaranteed way to get a ticket is to be an asshole. You know, if you're polite, put your hands on the steering wheel, say, you know, even maybe acknowledge if you know you did something wrong. Hey, I know I was speeding, you know. It's that attitude where it's going to be like, all right, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you, because the worst thing you want to do is not give them a ticket, right? And then they go make a complaint on you, say, I wasn't speeding. You know, that cop was an asshole. You know, he stopped me for no reason. He didn't even write me a ticket because he couldn't, you know? And so that's why cops.
Does that happen too?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, you get it all the time. Now it's changed a lot because of the body cam, which is good. But, you know, that's why once it was going down that avenue where the guy's just arguing with you, it's like, all right, you're going to get a ticket, you know, because I don't want you coming back and making a complaint. And, you know, now you're going to say you weren't doing anything. And, you know, so that's the biggest piece of advice I could get. But, you know, at the end of the day, there's always that risk that you might get a ticket. It depends on who you get pulled over by too. You know, there's bike cops, the guys on the motorcycle, that's all they do is traffic. They're probably going to give you a ticket.
So right now in the mortgage business, should people wait to buy houses? Are the interest rates too high? Are they going back down? What do you think?
I think that if you're in a position where you can afford the payment, buy the house.
Even at high interest rates?
Even at high interest rates. Because
when they come down, you refi
exactly. You know, and so many people get caught up on that, is that, you know, it's an inverse relationship. When interest rates are high, and if they continue to go high, well, guess what? Home prices are going to have to go down, because people, you know, middle America is not going to be able to afford. It's already at that point right now where, you know, if the average home price is $450,000, you got to make $90,000 to $100,000 to be able to afford that, you know? And I don't mean qualify, I mean just like afford that. And that's not including car payment, that kind of stuff. So if we sustain rates at this level for a while, which I think we're going to, we have inflation that's out of control. Rates are not going to go down until we get inflation under control. So if we sustain that, you're going to see, and you're already seeing this, you're going to see home prices go down a little bit.
A little bit or a lot?
I don't think a lot, because you still have the inventory issue. No one's selling their home, right?
And what's funny is if the rates are up and the prices are down, it's the same damn thing.
The same thing. Exactly.
It's like, you know, hey, I'm going to wait to get a better price. Well, if you wait to get a better price and the interest rate goes up, your payment's
guess what's going to happen when rates go down? Everyone's going to be like, oh, rates are down, time to buy. And then the prices are going to go back up. So what you need to do is you need to take a constant, right? You need to take a variable that's not going to fluctuate. Well, that's the price of homes. We know historically that the price of homes are going to go up, you know, unless something crazy happens, like literally dropping bombs. Over time, it's going to go up. So people buy homes based on payment. So lock in your payment, right? If you're cash flowing now, you can afford the payment, you got extra cash, all that kind of stuff. Guess what's going to happen when rates go down? Not only is the price of your home going to go up, because there's going to be more incentive to buy, but your cash flow monthly is going to increase because now you can refi. People get so wrapped up in the refi. That's why I deal a lot with investors, because they're not sensitive to rates.
What are the rules? A buddy of mine went in, he had the income, he had everything. He picked a house out. never had bought in a house. He was like 38 years old, had the money down, had the income, had everything, but he had a tax lien. And so he literally said they won't finance him.
Yeah, most programs, it depends on the program, but if you're going like a conventional mortgage that's getting bought and sold by Fannie and Freddie, you're going to have to pay off that tax lien.
Is that all he has to do is pay it off?
Mm-hmm.
What if it's ridiculously, high?
He has to pay it off or show that he's on a payment program with it. And then, if he has a payment program, that they're actively paying it, then they can do that. Okay, it depends on the loan though too. Like if you go VA, there's different types of, VA is a lot more stringent on tax liens and stuff of that nature.
Sure. What about the size of the loan? Like, what about if somebody wants like a $5 million house? They can technically afford it. What are the stipulations for those jumbo loans?
Well, the stipulations are going to be, so you got your conventional mortgages, right? Fannie and Freddie, they purchase those loans. There's guidelines attached to those.
But they don't have $5 million Fannie Mae.
It's 700,000, it's going to go up to 700,000, give or take, because they increase it every year with, cost of living and all that. And then in some high cost states like California, I think it's like 900,000. So yeah, you have to get a jumbo loan. Now, jumbo loans have their own guidelines. Like we have to adhere to certain guidelines because those loans get bought and sold. Like, here's the guidelines. We're not buying this loan unless you meet these requirements. So they're stringent, but they're also very easy, because it's like cut and dry. When you get into a jumbo mortgage, that's a lot of the times that's based upon the actual bank or the lender, right? And they can set their own guidelines because a regular mortgage company is going to sell that loan. They're getting it off their books, right? They're not collecting that interest. They're collecting interest on the front end. But when you deal with a jumbo mortgage, they might hold that in their portfolio, keep it on their balance sheet. And so they could do whatever guidelines they want, right? So sometimes you'll have less stringent guidelines. Sometimes you'll have more stringent guidelines. But when you're dealing in that price range, 5 million, a lot of the times you already have a relationship with your bank, like the big Chase, Wells Fargo and all that. And they'll actually, not all the time, but they'll actually lose money on the loan, right? Because they know they're going to get your business through, say, mutual funds and, all the other investment services that they offer. So it's very hard for most lenders at that range, at that level, to compete on those types of loans, on like I said, the high $5-6 million loans. So
any tips to the people that are buying $5 million houses?
Work the numbers. If you can get a rate right now, it's probably going to be a little difficult right now, but the golden tip with mortgages is to always put a mortgage on it, right? Like my rate's 2.6%. That's outpacing inflation, or it's below inflation, right? So why would you? Is
that locked in?
Yeah, it's locked in for 30 years.
So what happens if someone picked variable? Now they're going up. Now they're screwed.
Well, it depends how long the variable is. I actually advise, there's everything right now to suggest that once we go into, we're in a recession, right? I think we could all probably argue that,
I don't necessarily see it, but I hear we are.
You don't see it, but you're also at a different tax bracket.
I know, but dude, go to the mall. It's jam packed. It's like, there's only 1% of the rich. Dude, then I live in the 1% of the town because everybody around me has money. And I know a lot of people and they're all thriving. Their businesses are booming. Everybody's making money. You go to the malls, it's packed. You go to the restaurants, they're packed. I don't see the poverty, obviously, and I'm sure there is poverty and there was before, but what usually you think if we're in a recession, nobody has money.
Well, yeah. So you can go by the definition of a recession, 2 quarters below, GDP growth below, or you could go off consumer sentiment. Consumer sentiment is a huge factor in whether or not you're in a recession. If everybody believes you're in a recession, you're in a recession, right?
Period.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So right now, a lot of people are seeing that because of inflation.
Yeah.
They're cutting back.
But for example, gas prices.
Yeah.
So have you driven any less?
No.
Exactly. So how's that a recession? Prices went up, you got less money, costs more to do shit, but so what? It's not stopping anybody.
But here's the difference, Brad, is that your budget for gas on a monthly basis is probably let's just say 1% of your total cash flow, right? You get somebody in the middle class, somebody below middle class, that gas could be 40% of their total cash flow. So there's a different disparity in the amount of cash flow on a monthly basis. So
what would you say to those people?
I would say sit tight.
I would say get out of that class.
Exactly.
How do you get out of that class? You sell something.
Yeah.
You sell something. If you're a police officer in a middle tier income, again, go sell something on the side. I don't know what the rules are, but like, I don't care who you are. If you're out there making less than, let's say, 80,000 a year, 80,000 a year or less, and you're listening to this, folks, it's real easy to make more than that. It's just, you have to sell something. And if people are like, well, I don't know how, dude, get a hold of me. I'll show you how. I got closer school. I teach people how to sell. You know, you learned how to sell doing something that wasn't even sales.
There's a lot of skill sets that are transferable. You know, a lot of people are like you said, I don't know how to sell, but they haven't gone introspective and said, well, what am I doing right now? And how does that apply to sales? Because my wife was like, you need to go into sales. And technically I never had sales experience, right? But every time I would talk, because she's in sales, she's in medical device sales.
So that's another industry you can make a killing.
Huge, very good money.
Dude, they kill it in that game.
God
and they
bless
always hire hot girls, so she must be hot.
her. Yeah, she is. Blonde hair, blue eyes.
Dude, they're smart. They know those doctors will open up the door quicker for pretty girls than they will for old fat guys.
Well, and that's and that's funny you mentioned that. I mean, if you look at medical device, pharmaceutical sales, what are they? They're all good looking people. And that goes back to another thing, which in sales is that, impression is everything. People want to do they want to do business with people that they feel are successful, good looking. I mean, that's just human behavior. You're not going to get around that. So, but to answer your question, look at the skills that you have that are transferable. When we talk about sales, that's everything. What is sales? It's enticing, compelling, motivating people to engage in a task. You know what that also goes along with? Leadership. How do you motivate employees to want to work? Well, history will show you and statistics will show you that it's not about money. There's a fleeting, I mean, for some people it is, but when you're dealing with like a salary or something like that, and you say you're going to give them a raise, there's that hedonic adaptation, right? Where it's like, okay, now I'm used to making $100,000 a year. Now it's not that big of a deal. So what are you doing as a leader to be able to, make that person continue to thrive? And that's when you go into like intrinsic motivators, like what do they want in life? They want to feel like they're part of the organization. They want to feel like they're making a difference, that kind of thing. So all of that plays back into sales. When you learn those techniques, you can learn whatever you're going into. Okay, what do I need to do to, click on those intrinsic motivators of that person, whether it's to get them to perform an activity or whether it's to get them to buy a product. And the key to that is you got to listen to them. You got to sit back and listen for the clues. And we did that in Undercover work all the time. A girl wouldn't go up to you and say, hey, I'm a prostitute, I'm working. She would kind of skate around it a little bit. And, maybe if she felt that you were a cop, she would, not go in that direction. So you had to figure a way to get into that direction to open her up, and get her to start talking about that.
Yeah, but you don't teach sales. You don't teach mortgage stuff. You're not coaching. You're not doing any of that, right?
Not yet.
You going to?
I mean, I'm definitely thinking about it.
You should have came on when you're ready to, because a lot of my listeners usually hit up the people I have on and kick off their business. But
right. Well, you can kick off the mortgage business because that's still booming right now. Like I said, on the investment side.
Well, the reason I asked is because I agree with that. I teach, when people say, how do I sell? First thing I teach people is don't sell. Okay. Yeah. People are tired of being sold. Okay. Try to help. Okay. So literally your vibrations change when, like, if I approach you, I'm approaching, I need to help you. I want to help you. So the vibration is different.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, vibrations start to match each other's.
Yeah.
So if you approach somebody, I need to sell something, I need to close you, I need to make a commission, they can feel it.
Oh yeah.
But if you just stop selling and just say, okay, I'm not a salesperson, I'm a help person. I'm just trying to help you. And if I can't help you, that's cool. All of a sudden the vibration changes. And then the second thing I talk about is listening, what you just said, because there's only a customer or a prospect can tell you the information you need to sell the customer what they need to be sold. And you have to ask good questions and then listen. Most people aren't listening.
Yep.
How did the police work teach you to listen closely?
Well, there's different elements of listening. You could talk about like interrogation, getting confessions from people, and then there's the listening, like I said, when Undercover. I'll give you an example of Undercover work, when you talk about listening and not being salesy. So, when a prostitute's working, they're assuming everyone's a cop, right? Because that's their threat. And so if you go up to them and you're trying to be salesy, right? And you're trying to go, hey, you working tonight? I'm looking for a little entertainment. What are they going to do? They're going to back off and go, that dude's a cop.
What about the ones that just walk up and say $50, I'll suck your dick?
Well, that's rare. I mean, you're not getting that. I mean, you might get
That's
that.
just the movies?
Yeah. Now there's
I thought that's how it was.
there's we call them track hose and carpet hose, right? So track are the ones that work on the street, and some of the other jurisdictions, that's kind of like their main area where they work. In Vegas, we have a unique environment where we have all these casinos. So, I mean, if you want to call them higher end or whatever, they work in the hotels. But yeah, you're not going to see that.
Where's the street in Vegas you want to go if you want to get hookers?
Well,
I'll tell you, I don't know what year it was. Let's say I moved here in 91. So it must've been 93, 94. I don't remember, but there was a motel really down on the strip. I forget the name of it, but if you pulled in there,
Tropicana and Industrial near the In-N-Out.
I don't remember, Candlelight, or it was just one of those shitty, I don't even know if it's still there, but it was just a little motor inn type thing. But if you rolled in there and honked your horn, if there was prostitutes there, they'd open their blinds for you. Someone told me, I said, bullshit. So one time me and my buddy were drunk. I pull in there. I go, watch this. Honk, honk. Sure enough, boom. Girls opened up their thing. Is there any of those still running around?
No, I mean, not that I know of. I mean, you have your tracks. Like I said, like Tropicana Industrial was a huge one. But there's a different level. Most of them are going to be hanging out in the casinos. They can blend in a lot more. That's not to say that if you don't go down Tropicana, you're not going to find one. And you are. I mean, we used to do that all the time, working in those areas. But because of our unique, environment, that we have out here in Vegas, I mean, they're mostly going to be in the casinos. But, to go back on that point of, not being salesy, that's one of the techniques that you would use, when you're talking to a girl, is that you wouldn't go out there. You would almost kind of ignore them, and let them do the talking. Right. And so, there was a lot of times where, we'd get into the conversation and she was being, evasive or just didn't want to get into it. And I would just say, listen, I understand. There's no way I could even afford you anyways, but I'm just kind of curious, and get them talking about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. So now they're talking about it and they're just walking themselves. They're talking themselves into jail because, you're just acting like you can't even afford it, and now you're just having a regular conversation with them. And then you can get into that element, and that comes back down to body language too. What I would do, and this is a trick when I was brand new as a detective, it's all about what I said about, the visual cues. So if a girl was sitting at the bar, I wouldn't even talk to her. I would just slide in, act like I'm going to order a drink. I'd pull out my wallet. It wasn't even a wallet. It was just a wad of cash, room key, and an out-of-state driver's license, right? And I would just go, excuse me, walk up to the bar, order a drink. Now, what did I just do to that person that's looking at me going, I wonder if this is a potential client or a cop? I told her 3 things without even having to talk to her. Told her I had money, I have a room key, so I'm staying here, I'm a tourist, and I've got an out-of-state driver's license. Now I've already lowered that barrier, and I don't even have to answer those questions. And so
if they're observant,
yeah, but they are, right?
They're watching,
because I'm literally sliding in between them, and I'll make eye contact with them. I'll say hello, and then I'll immediately turn away. But
were you ever wrong? Like you thought it was a hooker and it wasn't?
There was times where once you get good at it, you're pretty good, right? You're up there in the percentile of like 98%. But yeah, there's times where, God forbid you're out with your wife and you go to the bathroom and you leave her at the bar in the casino, right? People are going to go up there and assume that. But that comes down to like gathering intelligence, maybe before you approach her, you're kind of watching her from the distance, seeing what activity she's engaging in. Does she have mannerisms that are consistent with someone that would work in prostitution? Like every time an older guy walks by, looking at him, smoking menthol cigarettes, not drinking coffee at the bar. Those are all clues. And that goes back to like, you have to be able to observe.
Menthol cigarettes?
Yeah, it's a huge
thing.
So
ladies, don't be smoking no menthols.
Yeah, no Newports.
If you smoke menthols, we know you're a hooker. What would you advise people to, like, I think it's keep your mouth shut is where I'm going with it. But like when you talk to cops, how many of those people talk themselves into trouble? Like if someone just didn't talk when it came to police officers, obviously I'm not talking about the people minding their own business. Be respectful. I agree with that. That's what I always do. I've never had any issues with cops beating me up, pulling me out of cars, searching my car, none of that shit.
Right.
Why? Because when they pull me over, dude, I am extremely respectful.
Yeah.
You know, so I advise people do that. But once you do get in some trouble, if you do, because in my mind, dude, everybody's a felon. Just some of you didn't get caught.
Right. Yep.
So even you, like anybody, I believe everybody pretty much, with the exception, is a felon. They just didn't get caught. So if and when you get caught, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Would that be a true statement?
Yeah. What I would say is that, you know, if you're not being accused of a crime, you're not engaged with the, you know, like don't walk up to the police at a concert and like, I'm not going to talk to them, you know, that's the kind
No, but I mean, like, let's say someone
yeah.
gets arrested. You know, they've caught you doing something or they think you did something. It doesn't matter if you did or didn't. All my cop buddies that I talk to have one thing they always advise, because I always say, what's your best advice? He says, keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth shut and ask for an attorney.
Yeah. Like all I can do is, you know, if people are out there, whether they get in trouble or whether they did or didn't do it, it's just keep your mouth shut. To the police, like don't talk. If you're in trouble, if you're the one in trouble, keep your mouth shut.
Absolutely agree. Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's now, of course, cops are going to say something different, right? Because we're trying to like either.
Yeah, but people talk themselves into jail, and they say what they say, and then they put it in court, and that's what convicts them.
Well, why do people talk themselves into jail?
Because people like to talk for some reason,
and that's the same reason why you get a confession.
But that's why I'm on dropping bombs, thinking, what value can I leave them with? And that is keep your mouth shut, friends.
Yeah. Ask for an attorney.
Coming from a 25-year-old police officer, how many people did you see talk themselves into convictions?
Yeah, hundreds. I mean, literally.
Now, what if they would have just shut their mouth?
Well, the thing, if you shut your mouth, you're not doing any more damage, right? I mean, if there's evidence against you to be able to convict you or arrest you, then it's there.
But a lot of times
there's not.
There
and that
isn't.
confession, especially when you deal with crimes like rape and child molestation and all that kind of stuff, you know, that
I don't want to help them at all.
No, you don't. And so you want to get them to talk, because that's going to be the clincher right there that is able to get you across that line, you know, because you don't have, you know, corroborating evidence a lot of the time, or you don't have video, right?
If you showed up to a house where a father beat someone to death for raping their child, you should let them go. Almost. Don't you think?
little street justice.
As long as it's legit. Because again, as soon as you give somebody this, because I think anyone that I know would agree, oh yeah, that's okay. But then people use that to say, oh, that's what was happening, when it wasn't really what was happening. But the point I'm saying is, when it comes to kids, dude, that's my soft spot. Like, dude, you shouldn't be hurting children in any way, shape, or form.
So like I said, when I retired, I was in the special victims section. We dealt with the worst of the worst. It was literally abuse of children that died, or, you know, were just abused. Elderly abuse, same thing. Or
that is a little bit rude.
Yeah.
But I mean, not worse than children, I don't think. I'm weird. I for some reason, kids are helpless.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, older folks, you know, they might be helpless too, though. You know,
no, they are. I mean, we're talking about exploitation, whether it's financially, you know, or just like neglect, right?
Well, one time I got that DUI I was talking about, one of them, part of my punishment was community service. So they had me go to a juvenile delinquent place, and I was told to go through the microfilm and make sure it's all in order, because there was all this, they called it microfiche, but
no, I remember
there was all these files, and they told me that I have to go in, and so you to put it back in place, you have to read a little bit of it. Mm-hmm. And I started reading, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, there's people out there putting cigarettes out on children's faces. It's unbelievable what's happening to kids. And that's when I said, man, one of these days, dude, I got to do something like big to help those abused children.
It's so, I mean, you don't hear about it on the news all the time, you know, but I mean, it's heartbreaking what goes on with some of these children, especially when, you know, I dealt with missing persons, right? And so you always knew when somebody was claiming that their 2-year-old was missing or 3-year-old, there's always like a set of circumstances where you're like, oh man, this kid ain't missing. It's dead somewhere, you know? And so those were the hardest, because, you know, you don't know for sure, but everything's telling you that that's the case. And now you got to like switch your investigation, turn it into a homicide, and try to figure out, okay, where's this child at? You know, I mean, not to get too gory, but I mean, we had cases just like that, you know, and then we search the house, you know, and you find the kid in a garbage bag, you know, with a bunch of clothes on top. And, You know, that's the kind, and this is right when I
And
was
they killed it.
Killed it. Yeah. And it's usually, and I hate to use generalities, but it's usually a boyfriend that doesn't have any blood, you know, relationship to the child, that that child becomes a nuisance.
Do you know that the statistic, believe it or not, child abuse is like 10 times more likely in a house where there's step parents?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
It's unbelievable.
Because there's no blood relationship, right? That, like I said, that child is a nuisance. It's getting in the way of our relationship. Where when you have obviously a child, your blood, you look at your child and you're like, okay, there's no way I would do anything to hurt that child.
Did you hear about the young girl and young guy that stabbed their dad?
Yeah, it just happened, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
I know that
details
guy.
On it.
I knew that guy. It was unbelievable. I knew the girl. Like I knew the guy and I knew the girls. I didn't know the boyfriend, but they grew up. Obviously, I didn't hang around that much, but I knew them as little kids. And as they grew up a little bit, he used to work for me. Then he went away, moved to Dallas or some shit. But that dude was so into his kids, it was unbelievable. Like he would have done anything for those kids. And then they killed him because they weren't allowed to see each other.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a whack society these days, dude.
It really is. And, you know, that's the unfortunate thing is that, you know, you can make it out of a career in law enforcement, right? And not get hurt. But I mean, psychologically, you just deal with so much stuff. And when I was in that unit, that's when I was having a child, right? People always ask, how did you deal with this? And honestly, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. It was very easy to separate my work from my personal life. You know, I was out there partying and having a great time, single guy. And then as soon as I, you know, had a child, it was like, oh, everything's different now. This hits home.
Did you ever arrest your friend?
Arrest a friend?
Yeah, like they did, like in other words, you did a bust or something, and you knew the people involved.
Yeah, well, yeah. We there's times where we did some sting operations in Vice, and they weren't friends. They were just like kind of like acquaintances, people that I kind of knew, and I'd always kind of stay in the background because I didn't want to have to deal with it. But yeah, I wouldn't. There wasn't a lot though. I mean, yeah, of course, you had your cases of you know, maybe pulling somebody over and you end up. I mean, I've been out in this town for 35 years, so it's kind of hard not to run into people you know and that kind of thing. But no.
Well, dude, let me ask you before we go: how can the Bomb Squad help Leon DeSimone?
Well, I mean, reach me at Leon the Loan Guy. You know, I'm in the mortgage industry now. Love doing it. Contrary to what people think right now, it's still a great market, especially for investors. You know, I really focus my my market and my business on investors, you know, because like I said, we're not as sensitive to rates, and there's going to be some good deals out there. There still is. You just got to kind of find them. But I do a lot of fix and flip loans and DSCR type loans that are primarily focused just on the investment space. So yeah, by all means, and then look out for me too, because I'm a little bit behind on this social media, you know, working undercover and being a cop. I kind of stayed off it. And now I'm like, all right, I got to get myself out there in social media and, you know.
Where you at? Instagram?
Instagram.
At Leon the Loan Guy, just like it sounds. LeonTheLoanGuy. Good dude. Appreciate you coming in.
Thanks, Brad. It was an honor.
Folks, if you guys need loans, or what if they're in California or somewhere else?
Yeah, I could do commercial type loans pretty much all over the country.
Yeah, dude. So Bomb Squad, if you want to help this dude for paying back for all the service he gave us, kids he saved, use him the next time you need a loan guy. Until next time, keep that shit real.
Dropping bombs with the real Bradley. Subscribe